All right, we're live. Welcome to the Jobs, Careers, and Future of Work podcast. I'm Brandon Sanger. We're here with Bill Golden, and today we have a special guest, Steven Rothberg from College Recruiter. So, Steven, do you want to tell us about what you do, and then we'll get into some questions?
Yeah, no sweat. So I am the founder and chief visionary officer of College Recruiter, job search site. We believe that every student and recent graduate deserves a great career and that it should be easy and inexpensive for employers to hire them. We're global. We have at any given time about 13 million students and recent grads. We define that as those with 0 to 5 years of experience, using our site to find part-time jobs, internships, apprenticeships, and other early career roles.
Let me jump in here. So one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to Steven is he knows a lot, but Steven is, I really think, is one of the few people that stays on top of different trends. And by trends, we often mean change, which sometimes comes as almost to tsunamis.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to Steven's insights today on how recruiting works, how recruiting doesn't work, and some of the big trends that he sees. Steven?
Yeah, cool, Bill. Thank you. And I think everybody would probably agree if they were candid that they're good at certain things and terrible at other things. One thing that I'm good at is sort of keeping my eyes up, looking across our industry, looking at other industries, and looking for sort of historical trends. When you see something that has happened 3 times in the last 20 years and circumstances now are similar to what it was back in each of those times, there's a pretty good likelihood that you're about to see that thing happen for the 4th time. There's a lot of that in talent acquisition technology. There's a lot of that in recruiting in general.
When you say thing, what do you mean by thing? Change?
Well, yeah. So, for example, the younger software developers that have been hit hard over the last year by layoffs, by a weak job market in software development, this is the first time that they've ever lived through anything like that. So they've got no reason to sort of have any personal experience with it. I'm 57. This is probably the 4th time I've been through that. So I wasn't surprised to see mostly large tech companies hoarding talent. And then as soon as they felt that they could, they switched from overhiring to overfiring. And that pendulum will come back. Will it be 3 months from now? Will it be 12 months from now? That's anybody's guess, but it's going to happen.
And let me jump in on something here. So I follow the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers. Some people may say, oh, job losses. That hasn't been the story I've heard over the last year. But if you look at the monthly numbers, you're absolutely right. There have been months where jobs exceeded expectations, except in the field of information technology. So where everyone else is building jobs, information technology has lost up to 18,000 jobs in some months over the last year. And those numbers do add up.
Correct. And the 18,000, I think one thing that people have to keep in mind too, is that that's the job, that would be the number of job losses. But because that sector was growing so fast, especially since the onset of COVID for those few years, it's an even bigger swing, because in many months, we would have had a gain of 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. And then you multiply that over the year and you had, 100,000, 200,000 new jobs created in information technology and related sectors. And then you kind of rapidly switch to forget gaining 100,000 jobs. We just lost 18,000 jobs. So that suddenly makes the market very, very different. Employers understand that when there's rapid growth in job numbers like we had for a few years, that they have to be more competitive, that they have to treat not only their candidates better, but their employees better. They have to be more aggressive and try different things that maybe they haven't tried in the past. But when they're shedding good people, it's kind of hard to get them to try different things that might be more effective, that might help them hire people faster, better qualified people, et cetera, or more efficiently, hire them less expensively. And that's kind of the situation where we're in right now. If you're in IT, especially if you're in cyber, some areas like that were ridiculously hot for a few years. Bill, I mean, you and I are from a generation where we remember Y2K. We remember the mid 90s, where pretty much every organization woke up and realized that on January 1st, 2000, their date codes in their code were going to be 00. And what does that do to every kind of multiplication? How many days has it been? Interest rate calculations, expirations of files, all sorts of things.
A lot
like
of software would theoretically just quit working.
Right. And
You
some
couldn't even log
did.
into it.
Yeah, some did. Most of it was fixed, and most of it was fixed because of massive hiring of software developers, a lot of them with very little, even to no experience, who were it was just a massive onslaught of labor to fix that problem. And then January 1st, 2000, massive layoffs because the organizations were satisfied that they had it under control. And now we don't need those 50 people.
So let's talk about social media. I know you're very active in social media. I see you all over the place.
Do we have to, Bill?
Well, you know, for some employers, one of the biggest trends that came out of 2014 to 2016 was every employer believing I can just put my job in social media for free. And maybe I don't even need a recruiter. I actually saw that happen many times. You know, they would hire a new grad or someone that says, sure, I have a login to LinkedIn or Facebook.
And therefore I'm a social media expert. Yeah.
Yeah.
So first of all, if we can, let me define what I consider to be social media and what I consider not to be. X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, social media. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, social media. What's not social media in my book, and a lot of people will disagree with me, would be LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a job board. It's a recruitment marketplace. And the reason that I say that is because no matter how you define a job board, and then you take that definition and you apply it to LinkedIn, it's a job board. It's a place that multiple employers go to advertise jobs, to search for resumes or profiles. The vast majority of the revenue comes from employers advertising their jobs or searching resumes or profiles. The business model is no different than Indeed, Monster, Career Builder, College Recruiter, any of the tens of thousands of other job boards worldwide. So the fact that people go onto LinkedIn and participate in conversations, and you and I have participated in many together, that does not make it social media, where, like with Facebook, all of that interaction is our users sharing information and telling each other that they don't know anything and you're a horrible person, but let's go for drinks later.
You post a job and someone comes up and goes, oh yeah, I was with them. That employer sucks.
Yeah, which is fair, and that's a whole other issue. But so social media, you're absolutely right. But what it caused me to think of is, and I think some of this is human nature. We always want the easy, quick solution. We're always hoping that there's a big problem solved by something easy. And recruiting is no different. Recruiting is really difficult. It's multifaceted. It takes a lot of things going right, both on the employer side and on the candidate side, for it to work properly. And sending out a tweet, no matter how many followers you have, is never going to solve all of your recruiting woes. Now, it's part of the process. It's part of the solution. But I'm reminded of the analogy that a good carpenter does not only have one tool in their toolbox. They have a bunch of different tools. And if they need to hammer a nail, they don't use a screwdriver. I, as not a good carpenter, would use a screwdriver. But remember, we talked earlier about, good things and bad things about each of us. So LinkedIn is definitely a platform where an employer can go, perhaps a recruiter, share that they're hiring and expect to see some response. It tends to be low in numbers, and recruiting to a large extent is all about numbers. You're marketing job opportunities. You need to think of it as a marketing funnel. You need a lot of people seeing the opportunity in order to get enough applying that you can figure out enough that are qualified that you can hire somebody. It's actually really staggering.
Let me jump in there. I just did a study for a government customer and a commercial customer, commercial in the defense world. We found that to get one job application in social media, depending upon the job, it could take anywhere from almost 200 to 600 views of a job before it resulted in just one application. It is a lot of work.
Right. And for most roles, you're probably going to want 10 to 20 applications in order to get a hire. And some roles more, some roles fewer, but 10 to 20 applications to fill a role is a pretty normal number. So you just take those numbers that you just cited, multiply them by 10 to 20. We had years ago, one of the Department of Homeland Security agencies run an ad with us for basically a security guard kind of a position. And it was located in a rural county in Colorado. And when they came to us, they basically said, we've tried everything. Nothing is working. We want to try you, and this is how we want to do it. And when I backed out the numbers of how many people they were looking to hire, what their application to hire rate was, what their click to application rate was, they would have needed that ad to have been seen by 200,000 people. The entire county had 3,000 people in it. The numbers just didn't work.
Right. So social media. So when the numbers just didn't work, I know that you have a favorite form of outreach, and there are different ways of advertising. What are some of the things that you think are very effective? Sure. If an employer, I reach in my pocket, I say, I've really got to make a hire. Where would you spend your money, generally speaking?
Yeah. So generally speaking, I would say there is no generally speaking. So let me be clear what I mean by that. If you are the vast majority of employers in the US and actually globally are very, very small. They only have one or two employees. They're what a lot of people will call SOHOs, small office, home office. And it's their typical person who's self-employed. Maybe they also employ their spouse, their first cousin, their kid, something like that. That's the vast majority of businesses. Close behind that are businesses that have under 10 employees. So think your local pizza shop. Those sorts of businesses tend to only hire one or two people a year, certainly only one or two people at a time, even if they're doing a lot of hiring, even if they're actively engaged. Those sorts of organizations, I think, are very, very well suited to advertising their job on sites like ZipRecruiter and Indeed. They tend to be hourly roles. They tend not to require a lot of experience.
Community jobs.
Yeah, they tend to be the kinds of jobs that people will apply to if three things line up. The job title is what they're looking for. The location is what they're looking for, usually within a few miles of where they live. And then the compensation is what they're looking for. When those organizations have problems, it's usually because of the compensation. It's either way below market or they just don't disclose it, in which case the candidate is going to assume it's way below market. Now, for the organizations that you serve, that we serve, more enterprise level, Fortune 1000 companies, government agencies, other employers that are hiring at scale, ZipRecruiter and Indeed, still good places. Sites like LinkedIn, College Recruiter, and Intelligence Careers, job boards, recruitment marketplaces, vendors that are well suited to handling large scale hiring at scale, high volume hiring. It used to be until Indeed came along got popular about a decade ago, that almost all advertising from a pricing model and the way employers handled it was really no different than it was in the 1700s. In the 1700s, you would basically walk over to Benjamin Franklin and say, hey, you're putting out a pamphlet or a newsletter or a newspaper next week. I'm looking to hire somebody for my cobbler shop. I want to run this classified ad in there, and here's 3 shillings or whatever the heck it was back then. You fast forward to the 90s or early 2000s, basically the same model, except instead of walking over to Benjamin Franklin's printing press, you went online, you pulled out your credit card, you probably dialed up on AOL or something awful like that, and you connected to the Monster board or whatever site it was, and you paid your $200 and your ad ran for 30 days. Maybe you got a response, maybe you didn't.
What
Maybe
people
there
call
was
pay and pray.
Pay and pray. If you did it in a bunch of different sites, pay and spray. Those ads are what those of us in the recruitment advertising business, we typically call that traditional duration based. It's a traditional way of advertising, and the cost is based on the duration, running an ad for 30 days. If you run it for 60, you're going to pay double. If you run it for 90, you're going to pay triple, that kind of thing. In the mid 2010s, so 2015, 2016, 2017, a number of sites, College Recruiter included, began to shift to performance-based pricing, cost per click, cost per application. And what's coming is cost per quality application. So when most job boards talk about cost per click, it means that the candidate goes to the job ad, they look at the job ad, and usually they will click on an apply button or more information or something like that. And then they go over to a page where they can apply. That might be on the job board. It's often on the employer's website, often on the applicant tracking system is what that's called. So the candidate has to take some kind of affirmative action. They've got to click before the employer pays. What that means is that some of the risk shifts from the job board or recruitment marketplace, from the employer to the job board. If the job board sends you no one, you pay nothing. It creates better alignment between the employer and the job board, because if the candidate does not respond, the employer doesn't pay. So the job board has a real interest in making sure that it gets that ad in front of candidates who will be interested. There's no incentive to get that ad in front of candidates who will not be interested, or in front of no candidates at all. So what's starting to happen now too is that job boards are, including us, are shifting to cost per application. If the candidate applies, we get paid more. It might be $35, it might be $50. And so if an employer needs 10 applications to be comfortable that they're going to hire someone, that effectively is costing them $250 to $500 per hire. That's not expensive for an employer to pay that. Employers are starting to complain about poorly qualified applications. I don't want to pay $50 for an application for my software developer role if the candidate only has retail experience. So we're starting to see the emergence of more assessments, determining in some way if that candidate is qualified. And it's anybody's guess as to what's going to happen. I have some of my own, but I think we're seeing the evolution happen very quickly, where candidates are going to see fewer ads that are irrelevant to them, And employers are going to see more applications from, or a higher percentage of applications from candidates who are highly qualified. And that's good for everybody. It'll be a lot less noise.
Could you tell us more about these assessments and how they work on the
Mm.
candidate's end, like how they get involved with it? Is it through the application or is it a general test? Just how does it
Yeah.
work?
So traditionally, when employers have assessed candidates, what usually happened was you might get 20, 50, 200, whatever candidates applying to a job. And then the employer would narrow that down to, say, the 3 best candidates. And then they would ask those candidates to go through some kind of an assessment. It could be online, it could be do a project for me, it could be something where you're not just looking at their resume or CV and saying, this person should know how to do it. They're actually demonstrating that they can do it. What's exciting to me is that in the last few years, the cost of online assessments has plummeted. It's like there's no floor, there's kind of a race to zero, and it's become economically feasible for employers to have every single candidate that applies go through an assessment. So what does that do? It means that the resume becomes less important. The resume becomes just one more piece of information. But now Bill's resume might look awesome. Brandon's not so much. But lo and behold,
Brandon's
Bill
got a
goes.
wonderful resume. We just hired him a couple months ago, so it's going to be good.
Well, it depends on for what job, right? But Brandon's resume might not look nearly as good as Bill's, but when they both go through a good assessment, a scientifically validated assessment that actually measures, can you do this job? Bill might fail miserably because Bill puts a whole lot of BS onto his resume. And he actually hasn't done that word. And where Brandon might be more humble, and he might not have done a good job of selling himself in his resume, but lo and behold, he can prove that he's really good at this work. That's allowed employers to de-emphasize hiring by school, which school you attended, to de-emphasize what your major was. Some of the best software developers don't have a computer science degree. They might not even have a college degree. They might have learned how to code in high school for kicks and giggles. And so it's really helped to open up hiring and become more inclusive. Now, what Amazon started to do a few years ago, and this I think is the future, is you can't even apply to a job until you go through the assessment. So forget applying, becoming a finalist, then assessing, or what started to happen was applying, everybody gets assessed that completes an application. Now the assessment for a small number of companies is at the beginning. So you can't even apply unless you are successfully assessed. Some of the leading companies in the assessment space, Modern Hire and Plum.io. So with Plum, for example, they're headquartered in Canada. They serve the US market as well, and I think overseas too. They one of their larger clients is the Bank of Nova Scotia. The Bank of Nova Scotia, that's one of the largest banks in Canada. If you are a college or university student or recent grad and you want to work for the Bank of Nova Scotia, you go through the Plum assessment. You are not interviewed on campus. You do not apply to their job. You go through the Plum assessment that they built specifically for Bank of Nova Scotia. You receive the same information about how you were assessed as the recruiter does. There's full transparency. So you can see your shortcomings, you can see where you're strong, and then the software says, hey, Bill, I think you're really well suited to this role. Do you want to apply? And it might say to Brandon, I think you're really well suited to this other role. Do you want to apply? What ends up happening is the recruiters deal with far fewer applications, and on average, they're far better. It's so much better for the candidate. It's so much
We're
better for
seeing
the
that in
employer.
cyber a lot. A number of employers and even at least one major government agency require you to go through Pearson for a test. And the employer will get the Pearson results. You will get them too. And it will pretty much say you have strengths, you have weaknesses. Don't
Mhm.
even think about applying that for this. And a lot of people find that helpful. It scares a lot of people too.
It does. Another thing about being human is that most of us are nervous. We get scared about things that are unfamiliar to us. And one of the ways that some of the better assessment companies have not eliminated that, but I would say minimized that, is very clearly in very clear eighth grade language. So, pretty much everybody's going to be able to easily understand it. It's not filled with jargon or, 18 letter words, is lay out exactly what's going to happen, when, and why. So you are taking this assessment and then they peel back the curtain. This is how the employer is going to use it. And also when you're finished in roughly, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it may be, this is what you're going to get. You're going to not only get the assessment so you can see where you're good, where you have shortcomings, etc., but you're also then going to be recommended. We're going to recommend to you which role or roles you should apply to. It might be none, it might be three. And a lot of candidates end up applying to the wrong jobs. They're actually more interested in working for the organization than they are thinking about the particular role with that organization. And they trust that some human on the employer's side will be able to read the tea leaves and be able to figure out that, Nancy would be really well suited into this role. She hasn't told me that she wants that role, but there are 3,000 roles available with this organization, and I've had 20,000 applications go through, but somehow I'm going to have time to do that. Candidates don't understand that process, how monumental of a challenge that is, but the assessments handle that instantly, automatically, and far more accurately than people could.
Yeah, I see that all the time. And a lot of people don't realize that recruiters, especially if they have the term technical recruiter as a part of their job
Mm.
title, they are focused on a handful of jobs or a narrow category. And if you aren't in their category of jobs, it doesn't matter how well you fit other jobs in the organization. You're just not going to be there. You're just not going to get found.
You know,
Uh,
I, I'm really glad that you said that because some candidates, I know people personally who have gone through that process where they really wanted to work for XYZ Corporation. They applied to a job because that was the only job that they could easily find on, Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever, thinking that some recruiter is going to say, okay, you're not well suited to this particular role in technology, but we want to hire you as a salesperson. There are some recruiters that will do that, but that is rare. The reality is they are focused on their job, on filling their roles, and they have their blinders on. And a lot of times it's by necessity. It's
yeah.
3,000 roles. They can't know all 3,000 roles.
And many of the jobs may, whether it's a multinational or even a large American company. In Metro DC, I know companies with up to 15 offices. Each one
Yeah.
is specialized, and they really have no clue what the other branch does across town. Let me jump in on one thing here. So we've got assessments.
Mm-hmm.
We have lost sheep trying to find their way in life and hoping that someone will help them. Uh, how do you see artificial intelligence backing up to assessments and recruiting?
Yeah. Okay. So, huge word of caution. So, personally, I am not an anti technology person. I am not anti AI. I think that AI has some significant risks for society and our industry and for candidates. But I think that the promises of it outweigh those risks. We might go down a dark road, but I don't think we will. I think it's going to benefit society more than it will hurt. But I think there'll be some of both. AI, from a legal perspective, from a recruiting perspective, is just another tool. And one of the mistakes that I am seeing with large employers with recruiters, like third-party recruiters, call them headhunters, retained search, executive search, whatever you want to call them, is that they are relying too much on the AI without understanding it and without understanding why the AI is providing recommendations. And that is going to really come back to hurt them legally, financially. So I'm the co-host of a couple of podcasts. One is called the Inside Job Boards and Recruitment Marketplaces podcast. A few months ago, we had Keith Sonderling on as a guest. He's the commissioner of the EEOC. So basically, they are the top watchdog to make sure that employers do not practice illegal discrimination when hiring. Yeah, you want to hire an accountant, you can't say, I'm only going to hire a white male, things like that. So his position and the EEOC's is that employers need to be able to explain why they hired certain candidates and not others. So if you are only hiring white males, the EEOC is going to have you explain why that's the case. And you cannot just point the finger at AI and say the AI told me to do that. Just like you can't point the finger at a third-party recruiter and say, these were the only finalists that the staffing company or the recruiting organization sent to me. You are responsible as the employer for the tools you use, including the AI, including the staffing company. So the same laws apply to the AI as applied to the staffing company. So if candidates feel that they're being discriminated against because of the use of a staffing company or because of AI, then they should be calling the EEOC. I think that most employers don't understand the AI. I think it's largely the fault of the AI vendors because they've built a black box that they don't understand either.
And you can't see the rules beneath it.
Some of them you can't. There are some AI vendors that will do screening and selection, basically saying, hey, here are the 50 applications and I'm going to sort them from what I think is best to worst. There are some that will literally explain to you, why is Nancy number one? Why is Fred number two? So on and so forth. It'll give you the scoring and it'll tell you how it came up with that. If you're an employer and an AI tool that you're using or considering using does not do that, stay far, far away. Stay as far away from that as the Denver Broncos should have when they were considering getting a new quarterback a couple years ago.
Yeah, and employers need to realize under the OFCCP, search criteria used in any search engine must be online for it's reviewable up to 24 months in the past. I've actually had a couple of orders come in where I had to produce that information myself.
And when you're the vendor, right?
When I'm the vendor, yeah. So it wasn't actually my responsibility, but a smart employer, I provide that information. A smart employer must maintain that information or have access to it. So if you're going to use a vendor for something, you want to ask about to what degree they track you and how far back your records go. And it is up to 24 months. So if I go in and say I need a junior software developer that must know Java and Linux and should have worked with these additional tools, 18 months from now, someone could protest and there needs to be a record of exactly how that search was built.
Right. And by how that search was built, that means why is this candidate number one, this candidate number two, this candidate number three? And that's something that a lot of the startups in the talent acquisition technology, TA tech industry, are choosing to ignore. And some of their buyers are choosing to ignore. I've heard some Fortune 1000 companies basically saying, our contract with such and such a vendor makes the vendor liable for this. And those employers are going to be in for a rude awakening.
Right.
Yes, the vendor might be responsible for it, but at the end of the day, it's the employer. And if you are a Fortune 1000 company, you are almost certainly going to have deeper pockets than some little San Francisco-based TA tech company founded by a couple of grads from Stanford.
So we've used quite a bit of your time, and I very much appreciate it because I think a lot of things come out. If you were to look at the next year or two in trends, what does your crystal ball say?
My crystal ball says if we were to sit down a year from now or 2 years from now, then I think what we're going to see is a massive shift away from employers buying eyeballs. How many candidates are you sending to us? And a massive shift towards quality. That the tools are there now on the vendor side, on the job board or other sourcing tool side, and on the employer side, and the financial rewards are there. It's just going to take a while, basically, for contracts to expire and new ones to come into place. Some of the job boards and TA Tech, other TA Tech vendors are working really hard. We are, and there are lots of others as well, to get in real time an automated signal back from the employer that you just sent us this candidate, the candidate applied, and their quality because of this reason. So some of our customers are now telling us that these candidates, a small number to be sure, that this candidate is quality because when the recruiter looked at their application in the ATS and the applicant tracking system, they moved them from applied to the status of offered an interview. If an employer offers a candidate an interview, pretty much by definition, that means that candidate has met some minimal level of quality. And then if the more that we can learn that from our employer customers, the more of those kinds of candidates we can send to the employer. Because now we can understand for that employer with that role, that candidate, that their characteristics make them quality. As good as that is for the employer, I think it's going to be better for the people that ultimately we really serve, which are the candidates. Because it's going to mean that candidates are going to see more ads, whether it's on an Indeed or it's in a LinkedIn or on Google with just, ads on the side of the page. They're going to see more ads that are relevant to them because the media, the job board, the search engine, whatever it is going to better understand. This is Nancy. Nancy's criteria, her demographics, her education, whatever, line up well with this employer's needs. And so I'm going to show her that employer's job. I think we're going to have more candidates applying to fewer jobs, getting hired faster, and being happier.
I look forward to all of it.
And when that happens, then, you and I, the three of us will get together and we'll have like sparkles and unicorns and all sorts of fun stuff happening.
Really quick here. Why don't you give us an advertisement for College Recruiter?
Sure.
Tell us who your target audience is and, set some expectations.
Sure. Yeah. On the candidate side, if you are in any kind of post-secondary school, whether that's a boot camp, a technical vocational school, community college, college, university, graduate school, PhD, whatever, or if you've graduated within the last 5 years, anywhere, just about anywhere globally. We're not in like Syria, North Korea, et cetera. Then we likely have dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of jobs that are going to be of interest to you. At any given time, we have about 3 million. We're multinational, we're multilingual. You can come to our site and run a search in Spanish and not just see the Spanish jobs. It'll translate your Spanish search behind the scenes to line up with the English jobs and vice versa. On the employer side, our ideal customer would be a Fortune 1000 company, government agency, or another employer that hires at scale. And what we mean by scale are dozens, hundreds, sometimes even thousands a year. And again, globally. We have a small number of employer customers that advertise on a traditional duration basis, including one of the ABC intelligence agencies. And it's simply because of inertia. That's the way they've always done it. And so that's the way they're still doing it. Almost all of our customers are on a cost per click basis or now cost per application. And then we have, I think, a couple that are doing quality applications, kind of sticking their toes in that water. So if anybody wants to reach out to me personally, happy to help. I'm at steven@collegerecruiter.com, or just go to our website, collegerecruiter.com.
And we'll be sure to put the link in the comments below. Well, I want to thank you for coming today. We like new grads. A challenge in our industry is, unfortunately, we're looking for people more often than not on their second and third job.
Yeah.
Often they're age 28 and older. So we'll bring people back to you. But we got Brandon, and Brandon, I see as the future. I tell him that every day. That one day I'm going to go to my island in the Caribbean just as soon as I buy it, and I'm just going to leave it all to him one day. I'm out of here.
I hope I'm capable of it.
Yeah, you will be. You will. I got a lot of faith in you. So, Steven, thank you. And if there's anything I can do to help push you, and I often do cross-post all of your many, many postings and chats across social media and et cetera. Anything I can do to help, let myself or Brandon know, because we think that you and what you do is very important, and more people need to know about opportunities for new grads and those who go back in and are coming out again, just starting out life.
Thank you. And every day you guys make this a better place. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. It was a great conversation.
Take care.